Alright, now on to part 3, which is to create the lid of the cup. I know some of you guys are having some trouble with this, but once again we're going to use the shape tools that are right here in Photoshop, pen, type, the selection tools, and the shape tools are right here. So currently with the ellipse or oval tool, I'm going to use those same guides that I used to cut the top of the cup out and drag from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. So over here I have the oval shape in the shape 2 and the color black. I'm going to double click that and I'm just going to make it not white but like maybe a gray. That way I can see it against the white background. The next step is to create the top of the cup, and I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this: pen tool or the rectangle tool. So first let's do it with the rectangle tool, which is I think the kind of easiest way. Now even though I switched from the circle to rectangle, I need to double check that up here it's the add to shape area. So when I make this rectangle across the top of this oval that I made, it's going to combine it just like the Pathfinder would into the same shape. Now I can take the direct select path and give it a little bit of an angle so it looks more like the picture and the top of my cup, and it's all one shape. Okay, that's one way to do it. Let's back up a second. The other option, the one that they show in the tutorial, is simply to use the pen tool. But once again, you need to double check that it's on the add to shape. We're going to click, click. It's a little shallow, I know. Click, click. And then just to kind of finish it off, I'm going to click inside of it. Now, you'll notice that it added that to the same shape that I had before. Once again, just like with the rectangle, I'm going to use the direct select to make the top of the lid a little bit more pronounced. Alright, I'm going to double click here because once again, I want a gray color, not necessarily a black. Now that we've got the basic shape of the lid, we're going to add some more blending to it. And if you remember from earlier when we did the cup, you can go to Layer, Layer Style, Blending Options, and it'll open up the blending modes. Or I showed you the quick shortcut was simply not on the name but on the layer. Just double click to the right of it. Now we're going to keep this open for a second because in the next few steps we're going to be adding a lot of blends. And luckily he gives you the settings for each one. The thing to remember is simply, as I spoke before, clicking inner shadow will just add the defaults to the top of the cup. But what we actually want to do is click on the word inner shadow, and you'll notice that my settings actually change. So if you can't find these settings, make sure that you clicked on the word itself. The first thing it says is that the blend mode needs to be normal. There we go. Second thing is that the color is all zeros. There we go. All zeros is pure black. And it says that the opacity needs to be 19. It's because we just want it to be a light shadow. So right here on opacity, 19, 20, that's fine. You can see it kind of makes it softer edged. The angle is -90. I can either drag the angle, or in this case, I might just hit -90, punch it in. The distance is 2. That's how far away it comes from it. The choke, we're going to leave at 0. And the size, we're going to leave at 3. Alright, I'm not going to close this out because in the next step, they're going to have us add another gradient overlay. So I don't need to close this window. I'm just going to click on Gradient Overlay, and we remember this from the previous step. And they're going to say at the bottom rows, we've got C2, B, E, B, B to F, and back at 65, blend mode at 100. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to click on the Gradient Editor, which is the window right here. There we go. And we're going to start with the first one. And we want, what does it say? C2BEBB. It's going to be a gray. 2BEBB. There we go. Okay. And then we want one at the middle. About 65 is the location. So right here at 65, I'm going to make one. Ooh, I nailed it. Imagine that. Got it right at 65. And the color there is all Fs, which basically means it's going to be white. 6 of them. Okay, and then the last stopper, once again, we're going to put the exact same C2BEBB. C2BEBB. And what it should give you is this gray to white to gray, and you can kind of look at your cup that you're starting to see it. I'm going to hit OK, but then I want to check the rest of the settings. Blend mode is normal, opacity is 100, align with layer. Here we want to use 0 as our angle. That way it's going left to right. And it looks like the scale is set to 100. So we're done with that step. The next step is that we're going to create the top of the lid. And once again, I'm going to use a circle and then shrink it down. So I'm going to go back to my ellipse tool, which is right here. And I'm going to use the exact same measurements because then I can shrink it down when I need to. That exact same circle. And I'm going to move that up. And the idea is I want it to line up with the top edge that I made. So I'm going to hit Command T and hold down Shift as I shrink the circle down. And the idea is to get it to fit perfectly on those edges. And that makes the top of the cup. Remember, you can't do anything until you hit Enter to commit that change. And I'm just going to make, with the Move tool, slight adjustments till it fits on the top of the cup. Now, how tall the edge of the cup is based on the shape that you made, so you can kind of adjust to make it fit. It doesn't need to be black, so I'm going to double click shape 3 and make it a gray. Doesn't really matter because we're going to do some effects to it. Now we need to do effects to this, so once again, layer, blending options, or the shortcut just to the right of the name, double click. Here we go. But this time the blending options are not to the rim of the cup, they're the top edge. So we're going to apply an inner shadow. I'm going to click right on the name. Okay. Blend mode needs to be normal. The color is all Fs, which means it's going to be white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the opacity is 50. So we're going to drop that down. You can move the slider. The angle is -90. I've got that already. Distance, we want it to be a 1. The choke stays at a 0. And the size is 3. So I'm just going to hit OK. Boom. Once again, I click off of it, and you can see that the cup has this kind of shadow inside that gives it some depth. All right, just to clear up some misunderstanding, if you'll notice, we are adding an inner shadow to this with all these settings. But the confusion that we had, if you look at the picture, he actually has drop shadow selected. But that's a mistake in the image. You want to make sure it's an inner shadow. Now, in order to make this inner ring, to make it look like there's some depth inside of it, it's really simple. All we have to do is just duplicate this layer where we made the oval. So I'm going to duplicate that layer. It doesn't look like anything happened because it's sitting right on top of itself, but I'm going to hit Command T. And holding down Shift and Alt, which makes it grow from the center or shrink from the center, I'm just going to shrink the second circle down, and then using the arrow key, just nudge it up a little bit. Now, this one has the inner shadow already applied to it. We have to hit Return because we copied that layer. But I'm going to double click, open my layer styles again, and I'm going to get rid of the inner shadow. But instead, we're going to add that gradient overlay again. Boom. Click on it, and we open up our gradient picker. It says our first stop is 827A74. So I double click and punch in 827A74, which gives us kind of a gray. And our second stopper, which is right here, is FB. If memory serves, it should just be an off-white. You could just use white, and that would be fine too. I'm going to hit OK. And then we just want to make sure that the angle is at 90. And what you start to see is this kind of beveled look where it looks like the top of the cup is sunken in. That's exactly what we want. Going to hit OK, but we're not quite done yet. This new layer, this inner circle, I want to duplicate that again. So I right click and say duplicate layer. Once again, it doesn't look like anything happened because it's sitting on top itself. Command T again, and we're going to shrink it again. Shift and Alt. And I'm going to nudge it down a little bit. Hit hit return, and then it looks like there's another circle inside that rim. That circle we're going to add some different effects to, so I'm going to double click again. Let's scroll down a little bit so you can see what we're going to do to it. Okay, double click the gradient overlay. This time all we're doing is we're just going to make both of the bottom stops pure black. That's what all zeros is. Black to black. It's not really a gradient yet. But this one, the top one, we're going to set the opacity to 0. So it's black to transparent fade. And then the one on the left, I'm going to drop it down to about 60. Okay. Looks like a fade. It's kind of dark. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. But I'm going to click on the color here. And it's asking us to do B8, B4, B1. It's going to be like a gray. B8, B4, B1. Yeah, so a slightly off color gray. If I click off of it, you can kind of see that it looks like the cup there. The next step is that we're going to add the little notch that most cups have in there. And it's pretty easy. You can just draw it with the pen tool, or some people that have difficulty with it, you can actually drag this picture over and then trace it. Okay. Now I'm going to take my pen tool and I'm going to draw roughly what I see there. So I'm going to click here and curve it. Remember, it's not like Illustrator, so you can't just click there to change the angle. You have to hold down Alt and then click. I'm going to go about here and curve it slightly. I'm going to go ahead and curve it here some more. And like I said, your notch is probably not going to look exactly like the pictures, but that's what my notch looks like. We've got that. Now we're going to do an inner shadow to this one. So I'm going to click the gradient overlay, take it away. And you can see that it's just gray now. And I want to fill it with an inner shadow. So I'm going to go click inner shadow right there. Notice the settings change. We want normal. And the color is all zeros, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually black, but we're going to set the opacity at 21. We want the angle at -31, being very precise. The distance to be 2, the choke is 0, and the size is 7. Looks something like that. So it's mostly black, 20%, and it has a slight shadow right there. Click off of it. There we go. It looks pretty good. You can mess around with those settings a little bit if you want your notch to look different. Mine's looking a little dark, so I'm going to take the base color down a little bit. Now, the next thing that we want to do is add an outer glow. So back to Photoshop, double click the notch, and I'm going to do an outer glow by clicking on the name. And we're going to do mode is screen, the color right here, all Fs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which means it's white. Opacity is 60, and it looks like the spread is 0, that's down here, and the size is 2. It's going to be really subtle, but you can see how it adds that little rim right there.